This is a video on making a plate with an insulation drop mold. You can watch my other PowerPoint on how to make the drop mold. So if you haven't done that, I would suggest you watch that pretty soon. I've got a slab roll here, and the first thing I want to do is make sure that I've compressed the slab in all directions on both sides. My slab here is about 1/4 to 1/2 inch thick. Our insulation foam is 1 inch foam. So if I hold this up next to here, I can see and check about how deep I need to be. If I go too thin, it's just going to be kind of brittle. Thicker than that, it's going to feel a little chunky and heavy. So I'm compressing top to bottom and bottom to top and side to side. Then I'm going to flip this over and do the same thing on the other side. And on this one, I can tell I got a little thinner here rolling on this side and a little thicker on here. So at this point, I'm actually going to do one more roll and try to even this out a little bit more. Let's see, so that feels a little bit more even. And let's see. And I'm going to go back one more time to compress, get rid of my finger marks. You can use a bigger rib or a smaller rib for this. My clay is here. I'm going to take my insulation foam mold here and put it on top of a bat. This is a particle board bat. If you have a plastic bat, it would be a good idea to put some newspaper down so things don't get stuck. But it generally doesn't stick to the particle board when you're hand building. So picking this up, I'm going to look at the shape of it and figure out how it's going to fit here best, and set it over that and just let it drop in. And go back to using my rib and smooth it out and push down on the inside. Let's see. So the next thing to do here is going to be just to wait for this to get a little bit drier, and then we're going to flip it over. I've waited for this to get leather hard, which means it's maybe a little bit flexible, but it's going to hold its shape when I flip it over. So that might take a day or so. If you're in a hurry, you could use a blow dryer on this step. So I have this ready to flip, and depending on how hard it is, you can maybe just flip like this. Otherwise, if it's a little bit softer, then maybe you want to take 2 pieces of board together and flip them over all at once. So we don't need our foam anymore, but we have an edge around here, and I'm going to cut this off. So I'm using an X-Acto knife. Your fettling knife in your kit should also work. And I don't need to go through this all at once. I can be slow and careful. we have the back of the plate and the front of the plate, and I was really cutting this a little bit drier than I would have liked to, so it became a little bit brittle around the edges. So I'm maybe going to have to go back and clean that up later a little bit more. If you have a Sureform tool, which is kind of like a cheese grater, that one is really nice to use. But for now, I'm just going to smooth this out and maybe put a little bit of water on the edges too. Okay, so this is not perfect, but I'm feeling a little bit better about it. Maybe even just squeeze my fingers around there. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put a foot on the bottom. For the next step, I'm going to be working on the back of this plate. It's always a good idea to compress, so I'm flipping it over and then I'm just going to compress this a little bit. And then I'm going to spin it around on my banding wheel and figure out where should the foot ring of this plate be. You could use a pencil to mark it or a stick tool. I'm just going to use the end of this because this is what I have handy here. So there I have an idea of where I want to put a coil on the back. So I've marked this off. Next I'm going to take some clay and I'm going to roll a coil. There's another video on how to do that, and that video focuses a little more on larger coils for hand building. We really only need a small coil for the back of this. So I've rolled a coil that's long enough, and I'm just going to squeeze it into a little bit of a triangle shape so that it sits really nicely with the flat side on the edge here and the taller side pointing up. And I already know here where I'm going to want to scratch, so I can start doing that. Let's see. If you have some slip, that's really nice. Otherwise, you can also just use water and that will work. But the slip is kind of like super glue for clay. Because I'm attaching something that's wetter to something that's getting a little dry on me, I want to make sure that I scratch this and attach it really well. So I'm getting it good and muddy, and then I'm going to go over to the other one and scratch this one. Remembering that I have this as my tall side, and then this is going to be my flat side that I'm attaching to the bottom of the plate. Where'd it go? Here it is. As I go around, I'm placing and giving a little push. I'm not really trying to stretch it out anymore. I'm just pushing it into place to make sure those clay particles hold on to each other. Then when I get to this end, I'm going to cut this one at an angle and the next one also at an angle to make sure they're overlapping a little bit. Smooth that out with my fingers. And I can maybe control this shape a little bit better. And the next thing I'm going to do is use one of my rib tools. I like this one that has the right angle on the corner. And I'm going to push this down to make sure it's staying on, and then I'm just going to use this to clean up that corner edge a little bit and push them all together. Okay, so I feel like this outside is compressed well. The inside could maybe use a little more compression. And this doesn't work as well on the inside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a really, really small coil and set it inside of this spot. This one also, I'm going to push it into the corner and kind of pinch it into place, but I'm not trying to stretch the walls. I'm just going to try to put that right in the corner there. As I go, and it looks like I'm going to need just a little more clay to get this last section. Okay, so I like to use the back of my thumb sometimes to compress really small coils and smooth them in. And to make sure this is flat on top, I can pick this over and just set it like that a little bit. So there is the back of my plate. This is the front that I'm going to decorate on, and I still need to clean this edge up some. So if you have the Sureform, which is like the cheese grater tool to go around the edge, that's a nice one to use. Sometimes you can also use a metal rib and bend it with your fingers to shave away some of the extra clay. This plate has now been smoothed out the best I can. I've done the front. I've got these edges relatively smooth, and I've also got the foot on the back. This would be a good point where I maybe want to cover it up so that I can make sure that the front of the plate and the foot are going to dry evenly, since this is wetter and that's drier. I could also put some slip on the surface of this now, or some underglaze if I wanted to start decorating.